The internet has rarely hit a collective pause like this. Not from a slick diss track, not from leaked messages or calculated promo stunts, but from something far more visceral and human. 50 Cent, the ultimate symbol of hip-hop resilience, the man who survived 9 gunshots in 2000 and turned that trauma into a multi-million-dollar empire. The troll who weaponizes memes and Instagram carousels with surgical precision appeared momentarily cracked. The trigger came from King Harris, the 21-year-old son of T.I. and Tiny Harris. In a now viral, expletive-laden rant posted to Instagram stories in late February 2026, King went straight for the one subject 50 Cent has treated as sacred ground for decades: his late mother, Sabrina Jackson. King didn't just poke the bear. He swung hard, smirking into the camera while surrounded by friends, declaring variations of "Your Mama Dead" as FCK N***A. Go dig her up. Post a picture of your mother of **Seeking Mama. He tied it to why 50 supposedly acts tough but emotional, laughing it off as a character flaw born from absence. The clip spread instantly. Fans recoiled, commentators debated boundaries, and even some in King's immediate circle looked visibly uneasy as the words hung in the air. What stunned the culture most wasn't the raw disrespect. It was 50 Cent's response. Instead of his signature barrage of memes, savage captions, or power move subtweets, 50 sat down in front of a camera. His usual bravado gave way to something quieter, heavier. Reports and video reactions described him addressing the situation with visible emotion, his voice carrying a rare tremble as he stated plainly that you don't speak on a woman who's gone, especially not a mother. No jokes, no immediate threats of retaliation in the classic 50 style. Just Curtis Jackson, the boy from South Jamaica, Queens, confronting a wound that never fully closed. For once, the internet didn't just scroll past. It stopped, reflected, and argued about what vulnerability looks like from a man who's built his entire persona on unbreakable armor. To grasp why this cuts so deep, you have to return to the roots of Curtis James Jackson III. Born in 1975 and raised primarily by his mother Sabrina in the rough streets of Queens, 50's early life was defined by survival and a complicated but fierce maternal bond. Sabrina hustled in an unforgiving environment, choices shaped by necessity rather than luxury. But she was his anchor. She instilled the drive, the fire, and the street smarts that would later fuel his rise. Then, when Curtis was only 8 years old, she was taken from him violently. The details have remained intensely private throughout his career, but the impact echoes in nearly every layer of his story. The hunger in his lyrics, the calculated risks in business, the layers of emotional shielding he built after losing his foundation so young. In interviews, documentaries like Get Rich or Die Tryin', and subtle bars over the years, 50 rarely lingers on that specific pain. It's not fodder for punchlines or extended storytelling. Her memory functions as untouchable territory, the one place where the bulletproof exterior shows its seams. He transformed that loss into power, from selling drugs as a teen, to the infamous 2000 shooting that left him with lifelong injuries, to battling industry giants, lawsuits, and feuds with everyone from Ja Rule to broader media figures. He built power, expanded into BMF adaptations, vitamin water deals, and more, all while maintaining the image of the ultimate survivor who never lets them see him sweat. King Harris, by contrast, was born into a different reality. Cameras followed him before he could walk. Wealth, opportunities, private scrutiny under his father T.I.'s, Clifford Harris, established Atlanta empire, and both parents alive and active in his life shaped his world. King has publicly spiraled at times, pushing boundaries online, arguing with critics, rebelling against the weight of his father's legacy. From a goofy kid on reality TV glimpses to a defiant young man chasing his own lane in music and controversy, he's tested limits. Warnings to humble himself or respect the game often seem to fuel escalation instead. In this moment, he mimicked a certain street toughness and pack energy even releasing a diss track and reportedly branding cannabis products with Sabrina's image, rapping lines like, "I've been smoking on Ms. Jackson," but without the lived gravity behind it. The irony landed hard for many observers, a privileged teen performing hardness toward a man who embodied its brutal reality. The rant didn't emerge in a vacuum. It escalated from long-standing tension between 50 Cent and T.I. The beef traces back years, early subtle jabs, a 2007-2008 period where 50 questioned aspects of T.I.'s legal situations, and more recent friction around a proposed Versus battle that T.I. pushed publicly. 50 reportedly backed off sharing the stage, which T.I. took as disrespect. When T.I. aired Grind advances on podcasts, 50 responded in his preferred arena, social media warfare. He posted an unflattering photo of Tiny Harris with a caption telling T.I. to keep his name out of his mouth. King jumped in defensively, and the exchange turned nuclear. King fired back with the grave references and dig her up taunts. It snowballed. More posts, a tombstone image allegedly shared in stories, diss tracks from King and even his brother Damani, and further family jabs. 50 trolled with Pepe the Frog memes comparing King to the character, and kept much of his energy light or dismissive on the surface, laughing it off publicly, while addressing the deeper disrespect more pointedly in other moments. T.I. dropped tracks like War and others, but later expressed some regret specifically around his son's level of involvement and certain lines crossed. In hip-hop and broader street-influenced culture, an unwritten but ironclad code persists. You don't speak on dead mothers. Not in jest, not for clout, not even in the heat of generational beefs. It's not bars. It's personal in a way that transcends entertainment. King's approach, tying the absence directly to 50's character, mocking supposed weakness, and escalating to grave imagery and branded disses, violated that boundary in front of millions. Fans flooded timelines defending 50's rare show of humanity, labeling King's moves as reckless, entitled, or unaware of real stakes. Others pointed to the cycle of escalation. 50 started with Tiny, so the family defended, but the maternal grave digging took it to another realm. Commentators dissected generational gaps, old-school stoicism versus new-age clout chasing, and the pressures of fame from birth. T.I. reportedly stepped in at points, acknowledging in interviews that certain territory shouldn't have been touched, even as he continued his own lyrical responses. The damage, however, lingered in public perception. For 50 Cent, who has spent decades turning every adversity into content, empire building, or quiet fuel, this one instance exposed the boy behind the legend. The internet felt the weight because it was undeniably raw, not manufactured for streams or album sales, but a glimpse of unresolved childhood pain dragged into the spotlight by someone young enough to be his son. This episode forces bigger questions about hip-hop's evolving codes in the social media era. How do we balance defending family with respecting profound loss? What happens when clout-seeking collides with sacred personal history? Generational clashes play out publicly now. Kids of legends testing boundaries their parents navigated differently, sometimes without grasping the full context of pain that predates their existence. 50 built his brand on converting scars into strength, rarely showing the tremble. King, seeking to prove himself or protect his own, inadvertently highlighted the humanity even the toughest figures carry. In the end, this isn't cleanly about victory or defeat in a rap beef. 50 continued trolling and warning the younger generation to stay out of grown man business in his signature style, while King doubled down in places, claiming things were even after his responses. But something subtler shifted in the cultural conversation. The moment reminded millions that behind the empires, the shots survived, the mogul moves, and the endless online wars, scars remain. Even the most unbreakable armor has seams. And sometimes the deepest cut arrives not from lifelong enemies, but from words aimed squarely at the one person whose absence shaped everything that followed. The internet moved on as it always does, but the pause lingered longer than most expected. In a space flooded with performative toughness, a quiet acknowledgement of real pain cut through the noise. It humanized 50 Cent in a way his music and business triumphs never quite did. And it served as a stark reminder. In the game of words, some lines, once crossed, reveal more about the speaker and the unspoken rules we still collectively value than any comeback ever could. 2/2. But this time nothing came. No jokes, no threats, no signature power plays or Instagram carousels loaded with memes. Instead, 50 Cent went live on camera, sat motionless for several long seconds, his eyes fixed downward as if he were gathering the scattered fragments of a pain he had buried deep decades ago. When he finally spoke, the familiar razor-sharp edge had vanished from his voice. It emerged soft, almost fragile, carrying the weight of a man momentarily stripped of his armor. "You don't talk about my mother," he said quietly. "You don't say her name like that." No insults hurled at King Harris. No voice raised in explosive anger. He simply looked wounded, exposed in a raw way that longtime fans hadn't witnessed in years, if ever. The internet froze in that moment. Here was Curtis James Jackson III, the man who transformed 9 gunshots into a defining legend of survival, who built a sprawling media imp. Ire from sheer grit, sarcasm, and unrelenting hustle, suddenly appearing not as the untouchable 50 Cent, but as a son still quietly grieving the only parent who had truly fought for him in his chaotic early world. That vulnerability hit the culture like a shockwave. Audiences weren't prepared for the pauses mid-sentence, the subtle hitch in his delivery that hinted at tears held back only by decades of practiced will. They weren't ready to see the eternal troll, the one who mocks everyone else without mercy, look genuinely hurt, his usual bravado replaced by quiet sorrow. YouTube. This wasn't just personal pain on display. Insiders close to the situation later pointed to deeper layers. 50 wasn't merely reacting to cruel words about his own irreplaceable loss. He was struck by the profound irony of the messenger. King Harris, amid his very public spiral in recent months, had shown flashes of disrespect toward women before, even within his own circle, including moments of apparent disregard for family boundaries and figures. 50's quiet, measured delivery carried an unspoken lesson. You don't truly value what you still have right in front of you. Appreciate the mother who's alive, the family structure and privileges you've been handed. That truth, delivered with raw emotion rather than venom or threats, elevated the entire exchange from typical rap beef pettiness into something more profound. It shook observers because it forced a broader reflection on themes of gratitude, irreversible loss, generational maturity, and the human cost of unchecked words in the digital age. Yet the story refused to end with that emotional live stream. According to accounts from those in 50 Cent's inner circle, what unfolded immediately afterward marked a significant pivot behind the scenes. Once the camera cut off, 50 remained seated for a while, staring ahead in heavy silence. He clenched his jaw, muttered something low about a sacred line having been unforgivably crossed, then reached for his phone. But not to vent frustration to a trusted friend, not to rally his team for coordinated online retaliation, and certainly not to plot some elaborate public revenge scheme. Instead, he made a direct, deliberate call to someone connected to the Harris family. The tone shifted instantly, no lingering softness, no visible hurt remaining on the surface. It turned controlled, ice-cold, and laser-precise. He didn't ask politely. "Put his father on the phone," he demanded. Not King himself. 50 wanted to speak directly to T.I. Clifford T.I. Harris, the man responsible for raising the young provocateur. When T.I. eventually came on the line, the conversation carried the heavy gravity of two veteran street-influenced figures sizing each other up without unnecessary theatrics. 50 didn't explode or gloat. He stated the situation plainly and firmly. "You need to get your boy." A long, pregnant pause followed, the kind where seasoned individuals from similar backgrounds communicate volumes through silence alone. T.I. reportedly acknowledged the overstep right away. "He crossed the line, I know. but 50 pressed further, keeping his composure. "I don't talk about people's mothers. I don't speak on the dead. He spoke on mine. So now you and me, we got to talk." This wasn't about escalating for clout or viral moments. It represented direct, paternal-level communication rooted in a shared cultural understanding of real loss and consequence. 50 continued, highlighting the core disconnect. "Your boy don't understand what it means to grow up without a mother. He don't know that pain, but you should. You know what losing someone too early feels like." T.I. reportedly grew quiet on the other end, as the weight of those words settled heavily. That silence carried extra resonance because of a lesser-discussed thread that old heads in both Atlanta and Queens circles have whispered about for years. A distant, peripheral familiarity between Sabrina Jackson's world and someone in T.I.'s broader orbit back in the day. It wasn't an intimate family tie or close personal bond, but enough street-level recognition existed to make King's casual, smirking mockery feel like an unwelcome intrusion into intertwined pasts that were never intended to collide so publicly. The disrespect stung on a deeper level because of that subtle historical link, transforming a personal attack into something that almost felt ancestral or communal in its violation. While the two fathers navigated this tense, private exchange, King Harris remained unfazed in the public eye. He jumped back online, going live again shortly afterward, shrugging off the growing backlash with youthful nonchalance. Laughing with his friends in the background, he mocked 50 directly. "Man, 50 old to be crying." The contrast proved stark and telling, youthful, performative bravado clashing against the quiet, hard-earned gravity of lived experience. King doubled down aggressively, escalating the situation further with Addy. Chanel grave references, full diss tracks, and even cannabis products branded in ways that mockingly invoked Sabrina Jackson's name and image. He rapped lines about smoking on Ms. Jackson, packaging products with her photo, and trademarking playful flips like Miss Jackson Candy Shop. This fueled widespread outrage across platforms, with fans and cultural commentators calling out the apparent privilege at play. A young man born into fame, with both parents alive and active, endless opportunities, and the protective shield of an established family legacy, now weaponizing someone else's deepest, most irreplaceable loss purely for views, relevance, and momentary dominance. Complex. The broader context helps explain why the initial comments cut so profoundly for 50 Cent. His emotional armor, built from relentless jokes, strategic trolling, savvy business maneuvers, and an unyielding public persona, has long served to shield the vulnerable boy from South Jamaica, Queens, who had his world violently upended at just 8 years old. Sabrina Jackson wasn't a flawless figure. She navigated a harsh environment with choices shaped by survival, hustle, and necessity. But to young Curtis, she represented everything: protector, provider, fire starter, and emotional anchor in an unforgiving landscape. Her death, violent, mysterious, and traumatic, shattered him in ways that forged the hardness, the relentless drive, and the calculated risks that defined his improbable rise from street-level survival to global mogul status. He has rarely revisited that specific wound in extended public detail across interviews, documentaries, or lyrics precisely, because it remains sacred territory. King's words didn't merely taunt or provoke. In the eyes of many, they desecrated a memory that 50 had spent a lifetime carefully guarding. This clash laid bare significant generational rifts within hip-hop culture in the social media era. On one side stand veterans like 50 Cent who have lived the pain, survived the streets, the betrayals, the bullets, the industry wars, and the personal losses, converting them into fuel for empires. On the other are younger figures like King, who sometimes perform that same toughness and street energy for clout, streams, and attention, without fully internalizing the weight, consequences, or unwritten codes that underpin it. The incident reinforced persistent cultural codes that still hold firm in many circles. Dead parents, especially mothers, remain largely untouchable, regardless of the initial provocation or perceived slight. 50's multifaceted response, raw vulnerability broadcast live, followed by calculated, off-camera boundary setting, served as a reminder that even the most successful mogul remains fundamentally human beneath the facade. In the immediate aftermath, the internet dissected every angle with relentless intensity. King's perceived recklessness and entitlement, 50 Cent's rare openness and restraint, and T.I.'s measured public restraint amid private family tensions. T.I. later addressed the situation in interviews, expressing that he hadn't fully enjoyed his son's deep involvement in the beef, and specifically noting a moment where he felt King had gone too far, insisting, "That's enough," regarding certain extremes like the t-shirt imagery and grave taunts. Some observers interpreted 50's approach as a subtle victory achieved through vulnerability alone, demonstrating pain without projecting weakness, while forcing accountability at a father-to-father level. Others framed it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked words and escalating disrespect in an always-on digital landscape, where private grief can become public spectacle in seconds. As whispers about the playground incident reached fever pitch across social media and gossip circles, the truth finally surfaced from an unexpected and credible source. A retired elementary school counselor who had worked at King's school during his early years. In a trembling voice note sent directly to a prominent gossip page, she explained her hesitation before deciding to speak. "I wasn't going to say anything, but maybe this will help people understand why he acts like he does." What followed was a detailed, empathetic recounting that peeled back layers of the young man's public persona. The real story wasn't a simple case of routine bullying or childish teasing. In second grade, a group of older kids cornered King on the playground and stole his backpack, the very one his nanny, Miss Angela, had packed with care that morning. It contained more than just school supplies. It held symbols of the fragile sense of safety and love he carried into a world that already felt overwhelming due to his famous parents' demanding schedules. The theft wasn't merely about possessions. It represented a sudden, brutal stripping away of protection in the one environment where a child should feel secure. The humiliation sank deep, planting an early lesson that any display of weakness could invite swift loss and ridicule. The counselor described how the older boys didn't stop at taking the bag. They tore it open right there, scattering its contents. King's favorite small toys tumbled out, along with snacks prepared with affection. Most painfully, they discovered and ripped apart the daily handwritten note Miss Angela had tucked inside. "You are loved. You are brave. You are enough." They laughed as the pieces fluttered to the ground like confetti of cruelty. King burst into tears, desperately lunging to gather the scraps, but they shoved him face first into the dirt. One sneered, "You ain't tough like your daddy. You a baby." Another mocked him as soft, spoiled, and privileged despite the emotional void he already felt. The moment seared into his young psyche. He didn't run crying to his parents. He didn't confide in Miss Angela afterward. He didn't report it to any teacher in the immediate aftermath. But the school counselor later reviewed the surveillance footage and pulled him aside privately for a gentle conversation. She recalled how he looked up at her, tears still streaming down his cheeks, and whispered with fierce determination, "I'm not weak. I promise I'm not weak." That single afternoon marked a permanent internal shift. "That's the day the tough persona was born," the counselor said plainly in her voice note. Right there in second grade, King resolved never to cry publicly again, never to let anyone witness his fragility, and never to give others the opportunity to label him soft or vulnerable. The armor began forming then, the loud defiance, the quick temper, the relentless need to strike first and hardest. But while eyes stayed on 50, a darker undercurrent grew from King's own circle. Childhood friends began speaking out anonymously. One posted, "BR always had a chip on his shoulder since second grade. Y'all don't even know why." Another chimed in, "That playground rumor 100% true. I was there. He ain't been the same since." Then came the most chilling. "He got jumped when he was a kid and never told nobody who did it." The pieces clicked, jumped, bullied, humiliated. What started as vague gossip solidified into something traumatic. explaining the over-the-top bravado, the constant need to prove toughness. King saw the story spreading and jumped on live immediately, red-faced and furious, insisting he was in control. "I wasn't jumped. Ain't nobody touch me. Stop lying on my name." But his body told a different story. He shook visibly, swallowed hard repeatedly, rubbed his hands nervously, paced without stopping. His voice cracked mid-sentence more than once. The chat lit up. He's scared. He's embarrassed. He's hiding something big. That playground story true. This exposes everything about his behavior. The turning point came when Miss Angela, the nanny 50 had contacted, finally addressed it indirectly through a blogger's DM. She wrote, "I will not expose the details of his childhood, but I will say this. A child who grows up scared of being seen as weak becomes a man who attacks others before they attack him." For the first time, the internet paused and felt a wave of empathy for King Harris. Here was a young man whose public chaos masked deep insecurity, lashing out to avoid vulnerability. Sympathy evaporated quickly, though. Blueface, ever the provocateur, tweeted laughing at the situation, not the playground story coming out. The backlash was immediate and fierce. "Blueface, you a demon. Mocking childhood trauma, you worse than King. T.I. gon' fight you next." Jaguar Wright inserted herself with a cryptic post. "King Harris is about to face the same thing Curtis Jackson faced as a child. Abandonment." The eerie warning chilled the timeline, hinting at deeper familial fractures. Chaos escalated late that night with a leaked grainy clip from the private 50 Cent T.I. meeting. Audio was muffled, but one line came through crystal clear. "If he keeps going down this path, you're going to lose him. Not to the streets, not to the cops, to himself." Fans went wild. 50 knows something we don't. Is King dangerous to himself? Did the playground trauma go that deep? What exactly did 50 learn from the nanny? The biggest twist followed. A producer who overheard the meeting's aftermath claimed 50 didn't just warn T.I. He asked a question that left him speechless. "When did you realize your son stopped feeling loved?" T.I. reportedly put his head down, offering no answer. The moment captured the raw pain of fatherhood gone sideways. When the voice note leaked and spread rapidly, the internet's tone shifted almost overnight. What had been waves of mockery toward King's recent behavior began to soften. People stopped purely clowning him and started seeing glimpses of the wounded child beneath the chaos and controversy. For the first time in this escalating saga, a current of genuine empathy emerged. Here was a little boy whose daily reassurance of love and worth had been violently dismantled in the place meant to nurture him, leading him to vow eternal self-protection at all costs. King reacted swiftly and viscerally. He went live on camera, visibly shaking with fury, his eyes glassy and his voice cracking under the emotional strain. "Stop talking about my childhood," he screamed into the lens. "I ain't no victim. Y'all try and make me look soft." But the comment sections had flipped dramatically. Instead of ridicule, responses poured in with unexpected compassion. "Bro, nobody clowning you," users wrote. "We get why you act how you do. You need healing, not hate." This explains everything. The platform wasn't attacking. Many were pleading for him to acknowledge and address his own buried pain rather than lash out. King wasn't emotionally prepared to absorb that perspective. Instead, he redirected his rage squarely toward the man whose measured concern and off-camera inquiries had unintentionally helped pull back the curtain on these deeper issues. 50 Cent, you think you know me now," he yelled. "You don't get to talk about me like you my dad. You don't know what I've been through." Then came a raw admission that fractured the ongoing narrative even further. "My real father don't even know the stuff y'all talking about." So why 50 think he the one who got to step in? That outburst revealed a core wound far older than the playground incident. Long before second grade, King had grappled with feelings of abandonment and being unseen amid the pressures of growing up as T.I.'s son. He carried the heavy expectation to mirror his father's projected strength and street credibility, yet every perceived stumble registered as personal failure. The playground humiliation didn't create the initial hurt. It crystallized it, giving the pain a tangible shape that manifested as outward anger, defiance, and an insatiable drive to prove he was never the baby those boys had mocked. While King unraveled publicly, heavier developments unfolded behind closed doors. A voicemail from T.I., apparently intended for a trusted confidant, leaked into the public sphere. In a tired, cracking voice heavy with exhaustion, the Atlanta legend confessed, "I don't know how to help my son no more. He stopped listening to me a long time ago. I think I lost him and I don't know when it happened." The recording grew quieter, interrupted by a shaky exhale. "I failed him somewhere. And now Curtis looking at me like it's my fault. Maybe it is. Maybe I ain't been the father he needed. I don't know, I'm trying." Fans absorbed the words in stunned silence. This was no longer mere celebrity beef or viral entertainment. It was a father articulating one of his deepest fears, that his son had emotionally slipped away, and he might never fully reach him again. The vulnerability in T.I.'s voice humanized the entire family dynamic, shifting focus from King's provocations to the quiet regrets and distances that fame can sometimes exacerbate. The revelations continued. An anonymous account claiming insider knowledge of a private meeting between 50 Cent and T.I. posted a single chilling sentence. 50 didn't come to check King. He came to warn Tip. The post elaborated that 50 had drawn parallels between King's trajectory and his own strained relationship with his eldest son, Marquise Jackson, years marked by public distance, silence, and lingering regret. He told Tip, "Your son is on the same path as mine. And if you don't reach him soon, you're going to wake up one day and he won't be reachable." It wasn't framed as a threat, but as a sobering warning rooted in hard-earned experience. 50 had walked the road of paternal estrangement and recognized the warning signs. Unchecked anger masking deeper pain, a repeating cycle of hurt. The anonymous source added a final layer of intrigue, and then 50 handed Tip a piece of paper with a name on it. The name of the person King has secretly been meeting with, a person who has been fueling his behavior, a person whose involvement would shock the world. Speculation exploded instantly. Was it a misguided friend, a mentor exerting negative influence, an industry figure exploiting insecurities for personal gain? The question remained unanswered, raising the stakes and suggesting 50's digging into King's past stemmed not from malice, but from uncovering dynamics that genuinely warranted intervention. The playground trauma, Miss Angela's insights, leaked private moments, King's public meltdowns, and T.I.'s raw confession converged into a narrative that dwarfed the original disrespect toward 50 Cent's late mother, Sabrina Jackson. What began as an ugly escalation from Versa's tensions, family photo jabs, diss tracks, and grave references, had transformed into a profound examination of generational trauma, the burdens of fatherhood under fame's glare, and the hidden costs of performing unbreakable toughness. 50 Cent, who lost his own mother violently at age 8 in Channel D. That devastation into legendary resilience, appeared to recognize familiar patterns in King. His responses, public vulnerability followed by private, calculated outreach to the nanny, T.I., and others, functioned less like destruction and more like holding up a mirror, urging reflection on how cycles of pain can be passed down or consciously interrupted. Questions lingered for everyone following the saga. Was King simply a villain in a rap beef, or a young man still carrying wounds from second grade onward? Did 50 overstep by probing childhood shadows, or did he act as the veteran who spotted dangers others missed? Had T.I. fallen short as a father amid the demands of stardom, or does responsibility now rest with King as a young adult to choose healing over perpetual conflict? And crucially, who was the mysterious name on that paper, the influence allegedly accelerating the spiral? The internet found itself at an unexpected crossroads. A feud sparked by mocking a deceased mother's absence had evolved into a collective mirror reflecting fame's quieter damages. The intense pressures placed on children of icons, the difficulty of breaking intergenerational trauma when every misstep plays out publicly, and the thin line between bravado and buried vulnerability. Healing, accountability, and even compassion had quietly entered a space once dominated by mockery and escalation. The next chapter, Whatever identity that name carried, whatever further truths surfaced, promised to reshape perceptions once again. For King, it could represent a painful but necessary confrontation with the boy shoved into the dirt, offering a chance to choose differently. For T.I., a potential bridge across emotional distance. For 50 Cent, perhaps a subtle form of redemption in attempting to steer another away from regrets he still carries. The story wasn't over. It continued unfolding in real time, compelling anyone watching to reflect on their own relationships with pain, protection, and the power of unspoken wounds. In hip-hop's arena of projected strength, this moment had stripped away multiple layers, reminding observers that beneath the loudest tough talk often lies real hurt, waiting not for amplification, but for acknowledgement and care.